Welcome to DIYEasyCrafts.com, how to make a basic knife. Now in this video, we're going to show you how to cut out the basic shape of a knife, how to bevel that blade, and we're going to talk about several topics to enhance almost any knife project. This video is for the novice, the beginner, the hobbyist, the guy that wants to make an occasional knife. And I'm going to show you really how to enhance that project with some cool details. The exact same techniques were used to create all of these knives. Now, for the purpose of this video, we're going to take you through the entire process of making this particular knife. This knife was made out of 1095 carbon steel, and you can find a variety of different designs on the internet. You can draw your own design. However you want to come up with the design of the blade that you want, transfer it or draw it onto the steel with a black magic marker. And then we're going to use a disc grinder with a cutoff wheel just to quickly cut out the outline of that blade. Now for the internal curves, you can see I'm just making a variety or a series of plunge cuts, carefully not extending beyond that outline drawn with the black marker. And then once all these little plunge cuts are created, which really just making little segments, I'm going to come in it from the side and I'm going to just slowly cut off each one of those little pieces. Basically, you want to cut out as much of the outline as possible with this disc grinder, and you can see how easy and how fast this process is. It really doesn't take long to cut out the outline of almost any knife. Now, after we're done with the cutoff wheel, using the same disc grinder, I'm going to switch to a flap sanding wheel, and this is just a sanding disc that has a series of sandpaper flaps. It's very aggressive. You can get this, about a 40 grit or so, and it goes through material very, very quickly. It's really good for finishing off all of the rough edges left by the cutoff wheel, so that you can smooth out all of those edges and really almost completely finish the curves and the outline of your finished knife. Of course, if you have a belt sander, you can always run over to the belt sander and finish off, some of those curves or some of that outline. But you don't need the belt sander. Now, at this point, I am going to drill holes for the pins, and these will be the pins that run through the full tang of this particular blade and hold the handle or the scales in place. You always want to drill these holes before you harden the blade. The next process is we're going to bevel the blade. Now, if you do have a belt sander, a 1 or a 2-inch belt sander without guardrails or side rails, you can use a bevel jig created just from a 4x4. I'll put up a link to another video that shows you that. The two pieces of metal clamped over the knife are a plunge jig, and that just gives you a nice straight plunge line that's perfectly even on both sides of the blade. If you don't have a belt sander, you can bevel the knife with that same disc grinder and flap sanding wheel. You just won't end up with a very distinct bevel line, and you certainly won't end up with that plunge line. But you'd still have a very sharp, beautiful knife. Just different ways of coming out with the same or with a slightly different end result. Now, this is that blade after it has been hardened and after it has been tempered. I also polished it a bit. I used just some emery paper and sanded it down. I think it was up to about 800 grit. I also changed the outline a little bit. I ground a little bit of a thumb groove in it. Just the first design just didn't feel comfortable in my hand. Now, at this point, one of the details that I was talking about is adding some spine file work. These really enhance the finished product, and it's basically just grooves that are usually filed into both sides of the tang, and then they really pop out once you add the scales or the handles. I use a Dremel grinder with you can use a couple of different size wheels to create these grooves or these cuts on each side of the tang. Very quick, very easy process. But you could also do it with a file if you wanted. One of the other things that really enhance the finished product is to use mosaic pins to attach the handle to the blade. These pins are really easy to make just with a variety of different round and square tubing. You can get these usually down at a local hobby shop, and I'll put a link up on how to create these mosaic pins. The next process is going to be to attach the handle or the scales to the blade. Now I've roughed up the handle portion of the steel just with a rough sandpaper. I'm going to use a 2-part epoxy. I'm going to mix a few drops of black paint into that epoxy just so that it's going to also fill in the grooves on either side of that spine file work. And this way you just have a black background against the shiny steel. You don't have to use black paint. You could certainly use just the clear epoxy. And I'm going to apply this epoxy, in this case, to the mosaic pin. And I'm also going to apply that same epoxy to the inside of both sides of the handle, as well as to both sides of the blade. Now I'm only using 5-minute epoxy, which is available at your local hardware store. So you do have to hustle it up a little bit. If you had 24-hour epoxy, it's definitely stronger, lasts a little bit longer, and gives you a little bit more time to work. But for the hobbyist and for my knives, I've never had a problem with my handles coming off. So I'm applying the 5-minute epoxy to both sides of the handle of the tang of the knife. And then I'm just going to insert the pins and insert the handles onto the pins, and then I'm going to clamp everything together. You can do this in a vise or you can do it with clamps. Either way, once it's all clamped, you really want to walk away from it and let it completely dry, overnight for 24 hours or so. Once you take the knife out of the clamps, it's a mess, but it can very quickly and easily be cleaned up. Either with files or, in this case, with a belt sander. And I'm basically at this point also going to start to form and to sand that handle into the shape, the thickness that I want, and the shape that I want for the finished product. There you can see the handle starting to take some shape. You can start to see that spine file work. Now when I get all done, this knife, the blade itself just seemed a little bit bland to me. An additional detail that you can add is metal etching. Now what I'm doing here is a full blade metal etching, but you could certainly do a small design. You could do a logo, maker's mark. I'm drawing this onto a clear transfer film, and then I cut it out. And I'm using a 12-volt battery charger with a salt water solution in order to burn or etch any of the material that's not protected by that transfer film. A very quick, very easy process, and it can really enhance a lot of different knife projects. It only takes a few minutes to completely etch each side of the blade. And then just pull off the film. I have another video on the etching. I'll put a link for it up here. And this is the finished product. So you have the knife blade that you cut out, the pins that were made, the handles or the scales that were attached. There's the mosaic pin in place. A very easy do-it-yourself knife-making project. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please check us out on the web at DIYEasyCrafts.com. If you liked the video, I ask that you please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to this YouTube channel.